Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Carlo Prusa MMA. Today we got a real special guest for you. He's coming off of a big Ultimate Fighter season finale victory. He is Mr. Joseph Morales, coming off his big win just on the weekend. UFC 319 took out Alibi Idris. Joseph, man, what's the feeling like? First off, how are you, and what does it feel like to be the latest Ultimate Fighter champion?
Man, I'm doing pretty good. Just been enjoying my time off and time with the family and stuff like that. And it feels good. It feels good to finally be able to celebrate, the two wins that I had on the show. And so it's like I get to celebrate three fights in one.
Absolutely, man. Coming into that fight, you were an underdog. You were a sizable underdog. You were able to go out there and obviously pick up the win. Did you find that satisfying?
Yeah, I always consider myself an underdog in any fight. I feel like it helps me with the pressure and but I had no idea it was such a complete turnaround. Like it was a 4-1, which is massive. I thought it was a little bit disrespectful, but I'll take it.
It's absolutely kind of crazy. So many people are watching the sport in this day and age. Very few people understand the life of being a professional fighter. And I really feel like it's a roller coaster. The highs are high, the lows are so absolutely low.
Yes, sir.
You're a guy, undefeated top prospect, won the UFC debut, 2 losses in the UFC. You find yourself back on the regional scene, having to then battle it through, get on the Ultimate Fighter, win the show, and now obviously earning your spot right back here. In that time, man, what are some of the biggest lessons and values that you've learned about this journey?
The biggest thing that obviously could take is just enjoy the little things, even if like the walkouts, the little interviews, the little things leading up to fight week, and everything that kind of comes with this sport. And you know the highs are high and the lows are low, but you got to take those lessons in between and and just come back stronger, come back better. And I had a long time off, a couple layoffs in between those 8 years of not being in the UFC. So I learned a lot about myself, and I'm ready to make a run for this for the title.
Absolutely. A lot of people understand, obviously the fighting. You guys are training for fights, training for UFC, all that stuff. Very few people see the sacrifices it takes to be a professional fighter. When you're battling it on the regional scene, you're not making millions of dollars on the regional scene. A lot of guys have to have a 9 to 5 job. You throw having a wife in there, having kids in there, stay up late, wake up early.
Yes, sir.
You miss birthdays, weddings, Thanksgivings, dinners. You do this every single day, maybe to find yourself in the position that you're in right now. That was a long 8 years before your first stint. It was a long road before that. What's made you stick with it through all these years, man?
Man, I think one of the biggest things too, like I've separated myself from the sport. So like I'm not Joseph Morales the fighter. I had to be Joseph Morales the husband. I had to be Joseph Morales the father. I had to be Joseph Morales the coach. And then Bopo gets to fight, So like it's just separating that personality and like understanding like, oh, okay, well, like I don't need fighting to be successful in MMA. You know what I mean? Like I love this sport. I love coaching, and my son is now participating and doing jujitsu with me as well. So so little things like that where it just kind of keeps me grateful, keeps me grounded, and that's how I'm able to do it for so long. It's just you got to find different ways to fall in love with the sport.
Absolutely. You made your UFC debut August 2017. You took on Roberto Sanchez. Where were you when you got the phone call the first time around that you're going to be signed to the UFC?
So I was on Dana White's Looking for a Fight, and he was in the crowd watching with Matt Serra and Din Thomas. And the first round of that fight, I got dropped in like the first 20 seconds. The guy was beating the shit out of me. He had my back. He was trying to choke me. And then the second round, I came out, and I think it was good that I got rocked because I completely had no idea what happened in the first round. So the second round, I came out like it was the first round, and I ended up knocking him out.
Absolutely. You made that UFC debut, obviously got a big victory. You won a performance of the night bonus, 50K. What was that moment like for you?
Oh, dude, that moment winning the 50K was pretty awesome. So we were in Mexico City, and Uriah was trying to. I had like 10 or 15 missed calls. I had a bunch of texts, but they were all from Uriah. And so Uriah was he was in my corner in Mexico, and so I answered the phone and I was like, "What happened?" He goes, "You won the bonus." I was like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "You won the UFC bonus, the performance bonus." And I was like, "You mean I won $50,000?" And he was like, "Yes, like you won $50,000." We had like an early morning flight, and we were supposed to catch a plane, and we ended up missing our flight because we were out partying all night.
Obviously you train over a team alpha male, obviously head coach Uriah Faber out there. There's Danny Castillo out there. So many great fighters, great trainers out there. How did you find your way to team alpha male?
I grew up in Fresno, California, and we moved out here about when I was like 9. And I was playing football at the time, and me and my dad, we were watch The Ultimate Fighter, and he started training while I was in football, and I used to go with him to practice and watch, and he was like, "Hey, after football season, would you like to try it?" And I was like, "Yeah." So, I was training at some small little garage school, and he was like, "Do you want to try jiu-jitsu?" I was like, yes. And we went to a school, and Uriah happened to train there. And, he introduced me. I got introduced by him by my kids' class instructor, who was his training partner at the time. And, so, I thought he was famous. He had his posters all over the wall and stuff like that. But this was before he was the WEC champion. So, he was kind of far from famous at that point. But, as a kid, you see this guy's pictures all over the wall, and you think he's a superstar.
Absolutely. One thing I think about that's so cool with you, man, you've been doing this for a very long time. I mean, a lot of people forget, man, 20, 25 years ago, this was not legal at every single state. Some people thought this was like the wild, wild west. They were calling it human cockfighting, all this crazy stuff. But either way back then, when you first started, did you either experience or maybe have teammates that experienced, maybe fighting outside, bars, barns, mystery opponents? Do you have any stories of anything crazy from back in the day?
Let's see. Like, I think the craziest things that I used to do would be like my dad would be like, "Hey, you have a competition this weekend," and I'd be like, "Oh, like against who?" And he'd be like, "Oh, well, oh, you're just gonna go weekend and you're gonna go compete." I was like, "Oh, okay," and I'd show up and I'd be 13 years old, and it'd be some 16, 17-year-old, 20 pounds heavier than me that I'd go and compete against. So, like, at that time, there was not a lot of kids my size or age doing the sport. So, it was kind of like take what you could get and go and compete. So, that I feel like it helped me a lot. Now looking back, it was kind of funny, but it helped me a lot kind of grow and just not have that fear of competing.
No, obviously now we're at a point where there's almost a UFC fight almost every single weekend now. You have the PFL, you have the bare knuckle organizations, you have karate combat, you have one. I mean, combat sports, especially mixed martial arts, I mean, this is mainstream as anything right now. Did you see this explosion when you first started?
No, like I kind of got to grow with the sport, and you kind of see the different generations and the different people kind of come and go. I'm old school, so like I like the GSP, I like the Chuck Liddell, the Rich Franklin, the pre Anderson Silva era, the pre Pride era of when all those Pride fighters started coming into UFC. Like I used to watch Pride DVDs all the time. I had the ones with Rampage knocking out Ricardo Arona. I used to watch Chuck Liddell versus Rampage and Pride. Like that's the type of fights that I grew up watching. I was telling Chael throughout the whole season of The Ultimate Fighter, like the first time I ever watched Chael Sonnen fight was when he fought Babalu at UFC 53, and I had a DVD of it. And I used to think Chael was the funniest guy from that fight, and he wasn't even a superstar then. But his fake scream, he would fake scream in a submission to make the guy feel like, oh, he's got the submission, and in all reality, he didn't have it. So like, I like that old school style. But it's good to see with the sport, like with McGregor blowing up the sport and stuff like that. And then now you guys, we have guys like Ilya Taporia, and you had the Izzies and everybody. So like we're getting these superstars now, and it's kind of making the sport a little bit more mainstream.
Absolutely. During your first stint in the UFC, one of the guys that you fought was Davison Figueiredo, a guy who turned out to be a champion, one of the biggest names in combat sports. Looking back at it now, what do you make of the experience?
I look back on it and, I'd like, maybe it wasn't the smartest thing to fight the number 13 ranked flyweight, in his hometown. It probably wasn't the smartest decision to do your second fight in the UFC, but that's just the type of person I am. I've always challenged myself. I've always held myself to a high standard, and the loss aged well. It aged well. He went on to have a pretty decent career in the sport, and I grew from it a lot, and it just kind of humbled me a little bit, and just hey, it's not your time this time, but it will be soon.
Following that loss, you dropped a split decision against Eric Shelton. You found yourself outside of the UFC. From that period, you were battling it out on the regional scene. Obviously, you were in Cage Warriors. You fought for Uriah's promotion. What was the mindset then, man? What was the feelings like, being on the outside trying to get back in?
Man, it wasn't easy. It wasn't an easy road, and I've always thought of, I deserve to be in the UFC, and so trying to find some tough guys and trying to finish my fights and just be exciting and make the UFC want me back, and it didn't happen, and the opportunity called with the Ultimate Fighter, and they were looking for flyweights, and some of the producers asked Uriah if I'd be interested. And Uriah was like, called me, and he's like, hey, I was actually in China, helping Yan Jiaonan for her fight, and I got the call, and Uriah was like, hey, do you want to do it? And I was like, well, like, I don't know, like, what do you mean? Like, I'm gonna have to be gone, and I'm gonna have to do this, and I talked to my wife, and my wife was like, no, you have to do it, like. And I wanted to, but I was like, oh, I don't want to leave my kids. I don't know. I don't want to leave my wife. And I have my coaching. I'm coaching at my school. I coach at Sac State. So, it was a little bit scary at first, but you don't get many opportunities where the door comes knocking at, to you. Like, and so I kind of just jumped on it and ended up working out.
Absolutely. What was the whole experience like living in the house? How did you like that? No cell phones, no outside world, just living with a bunch of professional fighters.
It has its pros and its cons. It's very, you don't have to worry about anything, and you just worry about fighting and training and stuff like that. But, being around everybody, you kind of get used to their habits and stuff like that. And then there's other habits that you don't get used to, and they just piss you off. And, you're cutting weight, you're hungry, there's a lot of testosterone, you don't know who you're going to fight, you're living with your opponents, and so it gets a little hectic, a little bit stressful, and it was nice to come home and kind of just take the edge off and just enjoy having my own coaches and my own team for camp for the finale.
Absolutely. You talked about him a little earlier, but Chael's son, and obviously you and Chael forged a great relationship together. What was it like having him as a coach throughout that season?
He is, he's an amazing, amazing coach. He's a really good friend, and he's just a good person. He wants to see, all of his team succeed, and he tried to put all the resources and make us feel comfortable, make us feel at home, and kind of try to take the edge off of the competition, and make us feel comfortable, and do our best. And he was always giving us words of wisdom, words of motivation, and just trying to make sure that our mental strength was there, and not just your technique or not just your cardio. Like, he just wanted us to believe in ourselves and make us feel like we're the best.
During that time where you're battling it out on the regional scene, trying to get back to the UFC, were there ever moments of doubt that you'd ever get back?
Oh yeah, 100%. There was times where I was like, man, like I had the conversation with my wife probably like in October before I even got the call for the Ultimate Fighter that, if I don't get an opportunity to fight soon, or if I don't get an opportunity to even, be in the UFC, like, I probably shouldn't be fighting, because, I want to compete. Like, I want to compete against the best guys. I don't want to just be, on the regional scene the whole time. And, I want to make money, and I enjoy this. Like, this is fun, but, fighting for $1,000 isn't that fun, especially the amount of money that it takes to go into it. Your camp, you got to pay your coaches, you got to pay for your food, you got to pay for your travel, you got to pay for medicals, like, you got to pay taxes, management. Like, there's just so much that goes into having a camp, and, now it's paying off. But there was a lot of doubt. I had a lot of injuries, and, we did have that talk of like, hey, like, this might be it. I might just be a coach.
You know, you're always the guy that I get really excited to watch. Just your style, how you fight. Obviously, your jiu-jitsu's next level. But one thing about you, man, you're always going for the finish. You know, when you're down there, you're trying to take down your opponents, go for different positions. You have that killer instinct, and you're always looking for the stoppage. You take a lot of pride in that.
Yeah, that's how we keep our jobs. That's how we keep our jobs. That's how we make more money. That's how we get to the next level is by finishing these guys. And I never trust the judges. The judges, sometimes they don't make the right calls, and sometimes they do. You never know how educated they are. You never know, did they know the guy or did they know the guy's coach? Like that, there's just little things. It's human errors. We're all human, but you never want to leave it in the hands of the judges. And I do take pride in trying to finish my fights. And like I said, like we're entertainers. We're entertainers and we're fighters. Like we got to make sure that we're putting on a show for the fans and for our bosses. And if we're not doing that, then even if you're winning, they could cut you. So that's my mentality going in there is like I'm fighting for my job every single time.
You know, one thing I love about martial arts is it invokes so many different types of skills, disciplines, morals, values on people. I've had fighters tell me that I was down on a very bad road when I started my career in martial arts, and it turned me into the person I am today, provide me structure, provide me guidance. How has martial arts evolved you as a person?
It's done a lot for me, and I feel like just like the mentality that I have like in my life is like, if we're in just a regular jujitsu match or a regular jujitsu training, like you're gonna get stuck in an uncomfortable position, and you're gonna have to be able to stay calm and work out of those positions. And sometimes that's what happens in life is, sometimes you hit a little bump in the road, and it's how you react and how you deal with it is how you're gonna be able to get yourself out. And so it's taught me a lot, and just being able to deal with adversity and keep a straight head on my shoulders. And I've never been in a street fight in my life, and that's just because I don't like physical confrontation. Like I like to stay away from it. And but I enjoy competing and I enjoy the sport, so it kind of goes hand in hand. I get to face my fears, and I also get to put on a good show.
What do you want your kids to take away from this crazy journey you've been on?
Man, just believe in yourself. That's it. Believe in yourself. Follow your goals. Don't ever give up on your dreams, man. Like I try to lead by example, and I try to just do good things for yourself. And the sport has done so much for me, and I've met so many great people, and so many. I have so much support and a great community behind me. So it feels good, and it's like when you do good for other people, like good things happen to you. So I try to put that example for my kids.
Do you think that fighting is more mental than it is physical?
100%, 100% mental. I'd say it's 90% mental, 5% spiritual, and 5% physical. Like you just got to be mentally strong. You got to be in tune with yourself, and you got to know what your capabilities are.
Absolutely. You know, you mentioned you do a lot of training with Uriah Faber. You know, for you, do you get more nervous when you're watching some of the guys you're working with, some guys you're training fight than when you actually go out there and do it?
Yeah, dude. I've cornered so many people, and it's just like because I feel like it's out of your control. You're not in there. You can't see the punches coming at you, but you can see the punches coming at them. So and it's just it's hard. It's harder outside because you can't mentally prepare yourself. You're trying to get this person as much information as you can, like how you see it, and but you can't react for them. So that's why it's a lot harder. From the outside looking in.
Absolutely. Now that you're back in, what's the ultimate goal for Bopo here?
The title, dude. I mean, anybody in the UFC is trying to get the title, and that's the main goal. And work my way up the ranks and just take it step by step, fight by fight. I'm not looking at the title or who's the champion right now, but uh, you know, this week I'm just gonna kind of the only thing I'm looking forward to is tomorrow. That's it.
Absolutely. You know, since you left the UFC the first time around, the 125 division just keep getting better and better. And now you're at a point where the 125 division is seriously one of the most best divisions in all of martial arts. I mean, it's absolutely stacked from 1 to 15. There's not an easy fight there. Does that
Yeah.
excite you?
Oh yeah. Um, because I feel like I'm one of the toughest ones. You know, for everybody in the top 15. I feel like my jiu-jitsu is like next level. I feel like my striking's really good, and I like to put on good fights, and I'm just ready for for a challenge. I'm ready for a challenge.
You know, you're obviously a big jiu-jitsu guy. You say when you watch you fight, big fan of jiu-jitsu. What do you think of this whole new UFC show? They're really putting jiu-jitsu on a really mainstream stage. You dig it?
I think it, yeah, no, I think it's great. I think it's great for the sport of jiu-jitsu. I got, my kids' class. I got some of the kids that watch it, and there's people that are gonna want to be, in the UFC without taking punches, and now there's an outlet for that. And then shout out to Mason Fowler winning the belt. He was my BJJ coach in on the show, and he's a good friend of mine now, and so shout out to him. He's doing big things too. He's putting the sport on the map.
Absolutely. All right, Joseph. Last question for you, my friend. We still got about 4 months left here of 2025. In a perfect world, how does this year play out for you, brother?
In a perfect world, I got one more fight, hopefully in November or December before Christmas, and maybe I win a bonus and I get to buy my kids a nice gift and my wife a nice gift.
Absolutely. Well, Joseph, man, thank you so much. Congratulations again. I really appreciate your time, brother.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. That's it for us today. I'm Carl Prusa. He is Mr. Joseph Morales, your Ultimate Fighter winner. Take it easy, fight fans.